Okay, so we've looked at whether or not males and females differ depending on their level of alcohol. But what about whether or not the level of alcohol differs, whether or not the relationship between the amount of alcohol a person's consumed and their attractiveness rating differs depending on their gender? So effectively, we're looking at the interaction the other way around now. We're asking, rather than asking if males and females differ at 0 pints, we're asking whether or not 0 and 2 pints differ for males, whether or not 0 and 4 pints differ for males, whether or not 2 and 4 pints differ for males, and so on, and then doing the same for females. So all I'm doing is using the contrast syntax again, and I'm switching the order around. So now pints at sex. And if I do this, I get a little table down here that tells me that males on 2 degrees of freedom have a significant p-value. So I need to take a step back here and go, okay, so what on earth is this telling me? And what this is telling me is that somewhere, for males, the level of attractiveness differs depending on the amount of alcohol the male has consumed. And this is not as straightforward to interpret as the other way of running the interaction. Because here we have 2 degrees of freedom. And so all this is now telling me, just like any other kind of one-way ANOVA, is that somewhere there's a difference between 0, 2, and 4 pints of alcohol for males. I don't know where that difference lies, I just know that there is a difference. And similarly for females, or maybe not so similarly, we see F is less than 1, and my p-value is non-significant. So I know that for females, within a margin of error, the amount of alcohol they consume doesn't affect attractiveness, or the attractiveness ratings. But for males, it does. We just don't know at what point that happens. So we need to do follow-up tests here. We actually need to run contrasts, and your proper sort of contrast, like what we did in week 6 now, on our males to go, well, at what point does the amount of alcohol actually affect attractiveness? So we're going to use PW_compare for this. That's why I showed it to you before. And it's exactly the same. If you look at the syntax I produced, it's exactly the same syntax. The only difference is instead of saying I.sex, I've now got 0.sex and 1.sex, and then I.pints. Now we already know that females didn't have a significant effect, so I don't actually need to look at their effects. I don't need to look at this contrasts for females, it's only males. So let's just remind ourselves then how gender was coded. So I've just right-clicked to bring up these menus. Males was scored 0. So all I'm interested in is PW_compare on males. So let's go back to my syntax. So I don't actually need this PW_compare 1.sex line. I just need the 0.sex line. I'm asking for Tukey's comparisons because it is post hoc and it's balanced. And I'm asking for my p-values. And so if I do this now, what I see is that males 2 versus males 0, so this is saying males who had 2 pints versus males who had no pints, basically had no difference at all between them. The contrast is negative 2.49 e to the negative 14. What this means is that this decimal place actually needs to be moved to the left 14 places. So there's 14 zeros in front of that too. So it's basically 0. My t-score is basically 0, and my p is 1. There is absolutely no difference between males' attractiveness rating if they've had 2 pints or 0 pints. So if there's no difference between their levels of pints here, it's no surprise that when I start looking at 4 pints, that I get exactly the same statistics. So males had 4 pints compared to males had 0 pints. Produce a contrast of negative 31.25. 4 versus 2 pints, again, negative 31.25. It's exactly the same because there is no difference between males at 2 and males at 0. The t-scores are the same, and so are their p-values. So this is reinforcing what we know from before. Males who consume 0 or 2 pints don't seem to have a shift, but once we hit 4 pints, it drops off dramatically, and it drops off significantly. And we know for females, based upon this test here, that really attractiveness ratings don't change based off alcohol. So if we put all this information together, the gender effects tell us that it's not until 4 pints that we actually get a difference in attractiveness ratings between males and females, and we also know it's at 4 pints that males are dropping off. So when we put all this information together, the conclusion that I'm drawing is that whereas for males and females, attractiveness ratings do not change at 0 and 2 pints of alcohol, at 4 pints of alcohol, despite females remaining stable in their attractiveness ratings, males substantially and significantly decrease. And so I could say that, I could write that up as a conclusion, and I could put my p-values in with my means as I want them.